Why a former assistant U.S. attorney thinks the 2005 death of Joey Georgousis is still suspicious. While initially it was labeled a drug overdose, we talked to investigators from multiple agencies who aren't so sure. Tonight we're asking more questions those investigators are also asking. Here's part 2 of our investigative series, Strangled. In office for 4 decades, the late Orleans Parish coroner Frank Minyard says he had a policy. Every deceased body had a picture in the file.
Is it your understanding that in August of '05, an entry picture would have been taken of a deceased coming in?
It should have been.
But the pictures taken, some pictures are taken in every case?
Yeah.
But when the family of Joey Georgousis went to locate their son's autopsy picture, they were told it didn't exist.
If it disappeared, I don't know.
Apparently, the picture did disappear. Joey Georgousis died in August of 2005, a few weeks before Katrina. The Orleans Parish coroner concluded Georgousis died of a drug overdose. The Georgousis family sued to get the cause of death changed. And through depositions and a lengthy investigation, they've concluded Joey was murdered. A former assistant U.S. attorney who investigated the case agrees. He retired during the middle of the investigation. You don't think he died of a drug overdose?
My personal opinion, is no.
The Georgousis death and investigation has a mysterious story. He's a St. Bernard Parish native, but lived and died in New Orleans. Still, St. Bernard Parish detectives testified that they learned of his death early that morning and drove to his house, hours before Joey's girlfriend made what seemed to be a frantic 911 call. The family thinks that picture could help show Joey Georgousis had bruises on his face, the sign of a scuffle. Here's how we know the picture did exist. In an affidavit, attorney Pat Fanning says he saw the photo, but doesn't know where it ended up. A potential key piece of evidence disappeared.
Do I believe that it was a drug death? No, I do not believe, and I would state with reasonable medical certainty that this was not a death due to drugs.
The Georgousis family hired pathologist Cyril Weck to review the autopsy and case.
But I do believe that based upon all the findings put together, that this is most probably a death due to foul play, strangulation, and most probably not a death due solely to drug overdose.
Another key piece of evidence, the positioning of the body when police arrived. First, we need to define a key pathological term.
Lividity is when you die, then blood settles by virtue of gravity into the parts of the body that are dependent. So if you die lying face up, supine, you will get the reddish purple pattern in your back.
When EMS arrived, Georgousis was face down, which means if he died that way, lividity would have appeared on his front side. But Joey Georgousis had lividity on his back. When EMS arrived, his body was found face down, yet he had lividity on his back, which would suggest then that he was flipped over, right?
Exactly, that's right.
It calls into question the timeline initially used to investigate the case, that Georgousis died of a drug overdose and was discovered by his girlfriend.
There is clear-cut evidence that the body had been moved.
A year after Joey's death, his girlfriend at the time, Jennifer Miller, told police how Joey died.
This interview that you're conducting this evening, is this a voluntary interview?
Yeah.
Miller spoke to a private investigator hired by the Georgousis family. 2 NOPD detectives, Charles Loescher and Tim Bayard, were there on behalf of the department.
You do understand that this is on your own free volition. You can leave at any time you wish.
Miller said 3 other people were at the house at the time of Joey's death, a friend, Jerome Carasquillo, and 2 convicted drug dealers, Vernon Cook and Dennis Brown.
Could you give us, just in your words, what transpired on the morning of August the 5th, 2005, prior to you going to work?
Vernon and Dennis bring more house to Joey, Jessica. Went in there and then they came out and they threatened us.
Okay. When you say they threatened you, when they went into the room, am I to assume that they were going into the room to do drugs or to make a drug sale?
Probably both.
So you're saying?
They obviously hurt Joey in some sort because when they came out of the room, that's what they told us.
Well, how long did you say this? Would you say they stayed in the room?
How long? Maybe 2 minutes.
10, 15 minutes?
Jennifer Miller says after being in the room with Joey for 10 minutes, Cook and Brown walked out.
Tell me exactly what did he say?
They said that they would hurt us. Not to say anything because we would kill you too.
So then that something had happened to Joey.
Right.
What did Jerome say?
Jerome just said, I'm scared. Jerome said, me too.
6 days before this taped statement, Jerome Carasquillo met with NOPD Detective Charles Loescher. Carasquillo's story matched what Miller told police. Carasquillo says at 4 a.m. that morning, he and Joey snuffed 2 lines of cocaine. At about 8 a.m., Carasquillo said Vernon Cook and Dennis Brown arrived at the house. Carasquillo says Joey was fine as he walked into the bedroom with Brown and Cook. He told police he heard some commotion inside the room, which he believed was a drug deal went bad. At that time, he stated Vernon and Dennis came out of the room by themselves, at which time Vernon and Dennis stated to him and Jennifer Miller, if you say anything about this, y'all will be next. Then he told police after Cook and Brown left the house, he and Jennifer checked on Joey in his room shortly after, which was about 8:30 a.m. He told police they found Joey face down in his pillow. They turned the body over and noticed Joey was not breathing. They decided not to call police because of the threats Vernon and Dennis made on their lives. Carasquillo says he and Jennifer Miller decided to wait until she returned home from work so they would have time to clean up the drugs inside the house. Carasquillo and Miller later recanted their statements. Here's why Carasquillo says he did it. The video deposition, part of a lawsuit by the Georgousas family to reclassify Joey's death.
Was that statement true?
No. I've never seen New Orleans police about this before, ever. All of a sudden, there's about 5 or 6 New Orleans police. There's a piss test, cup sample on the thing, and I'm already on probation. I don't want to go to jail for anything. So they already threatening me that I'm going to go to jail and violate my probation because I've been doing drugs with Joey if I don't tell him the truth. And had me in tears, pretty much had me in tears, really had me in tears, because he would not let me leave until I told him what he wanted to hear.
Before the U.S. Attorney's Office launched its investigation, the Orleans Parish District Attorney investigated the case.
You think Joey Georgousas was murdered?
Yes, I do.
Mason Spong has been in law enforcement since 1969. He feels the initial stories by Miller and Carasquillo, almost perfectly aligned, are the truth.
You believe those initial statements?
I believe the initial statements, yes, I do.
Why is that?
Because initially they were so genuine, and they were told, from my understanding, without a struggle. Yeah, and the struggle, by that I mean that the people didn't grope for the truth, that it just kind of flowed freely.
In fact, Miller allegedly told the same story at a New Orleans East adult nightclub, Visions. Spong interviewed the witness who heard that story, Tommy Mulkey.
When I walked in, I recognized her. I thought I recognized her, and I approached her and I asked her, I said, you look familiar. You know, where do I know you from? And she said, probably from my boyfriend, Joey Georgousas. And that's when I said, oh, sorry to hear what happened. She said, well, wait a minute, that's not what happened.
Mulkey says Miller next told him that Joey was murdered.
She just said he came in and smothered him and then ran out.
You didn't pressure him or anything?
Oh, no. I had a good conversation with Tommy Mulkey. He was forthcoming. He was genuine.
You believed him?
I did believe him.
So you believe the story he told you is true?
Yes.
Spong says he handed over his evidence to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Those initial statements Spong believes to be true implicate Vernon Cook and Dennis Brown.
You said you don't want to speak with us unless you get an opportunity to consult with your lawyer first.
That's correct, yes, sir.
Both Brown and Cook deny being in the house.
Were you at Joey's house at 7 a.m. August 5th, 2005? No. Were you at Joey's house at 7:30 a.m. August 5th, 2005? No. Were you at Joey's house at 8 a.m. August 5th, 2005? No.
In a video deposition, Brown actually admitted he heard a story that Joey was murdered, but couldn't recall who told him.
Have you heard from anyone, and again, have you heard that Joey Georgousis was smothered? Not that he overdosed, but has anyone told you, have you ever heard from anybody talk, if you heard talk, that he was smothered either by a plastic bag or a pillow or something like that?
I think I do kind of remember somebody saying that while he was ODing. I think that's what I heard.
You said smothered while he was ODing. What, can you elaborate on that?
So when I first heard the story, whoever was there, they must have panicked and smothered him while he was overdosing or going into convulsions. Whatever he was doing while he was overdosing, instead of them calling an ambulance, they smothered him, from what I heard.
The U.S. Attorney's Office has opened an investigation into the death. Mike McMahon started that investigation before retiring a year ago.
I'm hopeful that the U.S. Attorney's Office will finish this out. You have an obligation to do this, presented with these facts.
McMahon has covered several high-profile cases while he worked for the federal government. In his 32 years, he prosecuted former Saints player Darren Sharper, former NOPD officer Len Davis, local prosecutor Henry Dillon, and real estate heir Robert Durst. McMahon says the facts he uncovered surrounding the Georgousis case stood out.
This investigation, this case, was the most interesting one that I've handled in my career, by far. It was really, it demanded a full investigation.
Both Vernon Cook and Dennis Brown have not been charged in any way in connection to any wrongdoing in this case. Jennifer Miller's 2006 statement, which you just heard in that story, did skip because of damage to the audio tape. Miller worked at Brennan's restaurant in 2005. Records show she arrived to work late that morning around 8:30 and left early. Records obtained by the Georgousis family show she left at 12:30 and was only paid for 4 hours that day. She left her shift early. The ambulance report from that day shows when EMS arrived at the scene, they worked on Joey for 29 minutes. During that entire time, Joey had no blood pressure and no pulse and was unresponsive. It's unclear why they still took him to the hospital. Former St. Bernard Parish Sheriff Jack Stevens declined our request for an interview. In a statement, he said in part, now that Mr. Georgousis has exhausted all of his political connections with no success because no murder ever occurred, this case has become the subject of this television report by Fox 8 News. This overdose death, which occurred over 15 years ago, has now been investigated by NOPD, the Orleans Parish Coroner, JPSO, the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, a federal grand jury, and a number of private investigators hired by Mr. Georgousis, with no charges ever brought against anyone for murder. Stevens continues, saying Mr. Georgousis is obviously unable to accept the fact that his son was a drug addict who died by his own hand.